Imagine this. You run a factory near Phnom Penh. Your country has a coastline. It has a seaport. It sells clothes, shoes, rice, and manufactured goods to the world. But to move a lot of that cargo cheaply, it still has to pass through Vietnam first. That's the problem Cambodia wants to solve with one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in its history, the Funan Techo Canal, a man-made waterway roughly 180 kilometers or 112 miles long, linking the Phnom Penh area to the Gulf of Thailand. Supporters call it an economic lifeline. Critics call it expensive, risky, and geopolitically loaded. And in Vietnam, downstream, officials and farmers are asking a much darker question. What happens if this shortcut changes the flow of the Mekong? Today, we're going inside the canal that could reshape Cambodia's trade, test its relationship with Vietnam, and deepen China's role in mainland Southeast Asia. To understand why this canal matters, forget politics for a second. Look at the map. Cambodia's economic heart is inland around Phnom Penh. That's where factories, warehouses, workers, and river terminals are concentrated. The problem is that the natural river route from Phnom Penh doesn't flow toward Cambodia's main deepwater coast. It flows southeast, through the Mekong and Basak system, toward Vietnam. So even though Cambodia has its own access to the sea, geography has been working against it. And geography can be expensive. For a logistics manager, every extra border crossing means paperwork. Every transfer means delay. Every delay means a buyer somewhere else starts looking for another supplier. That's where this story begins, not with ideology, but with a shipping route. Cambodia's economy has grown around exports, especially garments, footwear, agricultural products, and light manufacturing. A lot of inland cargo moves by river because river transport is usually cheaper than trucking heavy goods over long distances. And for years, much of that river traffic from the Phnom Penh area has depended on routes that pass into Vietnamese waterways and ports before reaching global shipping lanes. That doesn't mean all Cambodian exports go through Vietnam. They don't. But it does mean Vietnam has been a critical transit partner for a large share of Cambodia's inland waterborne trade. And that dependence comes with costs. Cambodian officials and business groups have long argued that routing cargo through Vietnam can add extra handling, port fees, customs friction, scheduling delays, and seasonal uncertainty when river levels drop. In dry months, barges may have to carry lighter loads. In rough weather, schedules can slip. And for low-margin industries, small delays can become big problems. A shirt made in Cambodia only stays competitive if it arrives on time, and cheaply. So from Cambodia's point of view, this isn't just about convenience, it's about control. At this point, a fair question is obvious. If Cambodia already has a coast, why not just send everything to its own port? And the answer is, it already does, just not as easily as it would like. Cambodia's main maritime hub, Sihanoukville Autonomous Port, has been expanding and is central to the country's long-term trade strategy. Road and rail links matter too. But there's a catch. Phnom Penh, where much of the country's industry is concentrated, does not have a direct navigable inland water route to Cambodia's own coast. So the canal's purpose is not to magically create sea access. Cambodia already has that. The purpose is to create a direct Cambodian water route from the inland industrial core to the Gulf of Thailand, without relying on Vietnamese transit. That's an important difference. The canal would not replace ports like Sihanoukville. If anything, it could help feed Cambodian coastal ports and shipping routes more directly. And that is why this project has become so politically powerful in Phnom Penh, because on paper, it solves a real problem. But on paper is the easy part. Officially, the project is called the Funan Techo Canal. The headline specifications most often cited are striking. Roughly 180 kilometers long, around 100 meters wide, about 5.4 meters or 18 feet deep, designed to handle vessels of up to around 3,000 deadweight tons, according to project backers. In simple terms, Cambodia wants to connect the Phnom Penh region to the Gulf of Thailand through its own internal waterway network. No Vietnamese transit corridor. No dependence on a downstream neighbor for every shipment. A straighter path from factory zones and farm areas to Cambodia's own coast. For supporters, it's a nation-building project, a shipping project, an irrigation project, a sovereignty project, and maybe, they argue, a once-in-a-generation fix for a structural weakness in Cambodia's economy. But to do that, Cambodia isn't just digging a channel, it's remaking a landscape. The canal would cut through multiple provinces, crossing farmland, local roads, waterways, and settled communities. That means bridges. A lot of them. It also means water control infrastructure, including lock or gate systems, depending on final engineering design, to keep the route navigable, manage water levels, and reduce problems like saltwater intrusion. And this is where megaprojects stop being lines on a map and start becoming personal. Because somewhere along that route is a rice field, a home, a fishing pond, a roadside shop, a family that may hear the word development and wonder whether it means opportunity or relocation. Human rights groups and local advocates have warned for years that large infrastructure projects in the region can move faster than transparency, that land acquisition, compensation, and consultation can be uneven, and that people living along the route may bear the cost long before they see the benefits. Then there's the engineering itself. Cambodia's terrain is not empty land waiting for a canal. It includes floodplains, unstable soils, seasonal water swings, and a very high maintenance challenge once the canal is built. A canal can be dug once, but it has to be managed, dredged, and defended from silt and erosion for decades. And that brings us to the next question. Who is paying for all this? The project's estimated cost has widely been reported at around $1.7 billion. Cambodian officials have described the financing structure as a public-private partnership using a build, operate, transfer model, meaning private partners help build and operate the canal for years before control fully returns to the state. Officials have also said Cambodian interests would retain a controlling stake, while Chinese-backed participation would play a major role in financing and construction. One company frequently linked to the project is China Road and Bridge Corporation, a major state-owned Chinese infrastructure firm with experience across Asia and Africa. Some of the exact financing terms, timelines, and long-term risk-sharing details have not always been fully clear in public reporting. But one thing is clear. China is central to this story. And that matters because the canal is not just a transport project. It fits a broader pattern. Chinese capital, Chinese engineering, and long-term Chinese involvement in strategic infrastructure across Southeast Asia. For Cambodia, that can mean access to money and expertise it might struggle to mobilize alone. For critics, it raises a different concern. Is Cambodia reducing one dependency only to create another? If you listen to the canal's supporters, the upside is massive. First, trade. Backers say a direct Cambodian waterway could reduce transport times, cut handling steps, and lower logistics costs for cargo moving from the Phnom Penh area to the coast. In official presentations and media reports, supporters have cited savings of roughly $170 for a 20-foot container and more for a 40-foot container on some routes. Some government projections have gone further, suggesting the canal could reduce logistics costs by around 16% in certain cases. Those are estimates, not guarantees. Actual savings would depend on traffic volumes, maintenance costs, fuel prices, draft conditions, and how much cargo truly shifts onto the canal. But if the route works as planned, the economic logic is easy to understand. Fewer handoffs, less dependence on foreign transit, more domestic control over trade. Second, agriculture. Supporters say the canal could also improve irrigation, especially in provinces like Kandal and Takeo, helping some farmers plant more reliably in the dry season and potentially support additional crop cycles in some areas. For a planter in Phnom Penh, that means higher productivity. For a farmer, it means something simpler: water when the fields need it. Backers also talk about fisheries, aquaculture, rural jobs, and new economic zones along the canal corridor. In other words, the canal is being sold as much more than a shipping lane. It is being sold as a development corridor. And that's exactly why the next part matters so much. Because the same water Cambodia wants to manage more effectively is part of a system Vietnam depends on too. For Vietnam, the Mekong is not an abstract geopolitical issue. It is food. It is fresh water. It is livelihoods. The Mekong Delta is one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. It supports rice farming, fruit production, aquaculture, and millions of people whose lives depend on a very delicate balance of freshwater, sediment, and seasonal flow. That balance is already under stress. Upstream dams, climate change, drought, subsidence, sand mining, and rising seas are all putting pressure on the delta. So when Cambodia proposes a major new canal linked to the Mekong-Basak system, Vietnam pays attention. Cambodia has argued that the canal would draw only a tiny share of total Mekong flow. A figure often cited in public debate is around 0.053%. But Vietnam's concern is not just the annual percentage, it's when water is taken. It's what happens in the dry season. It's whether local flow changes worsen salinity intrusion, when seawater pushes farther inland and damages crops and soil. And perhaps most importantly, it's the cumulative effect. A delta does not fail all at once. It gets weaker, one pressure at a time. That is why Vietnamese officials and experts have called for more detailed environmental study, especially on transboundary impacts, meaning impacts that do not stop at the border. Cambodia says the risks are manageable. Vietnam says the basin is already too fragile for guesswork. And neither side is talking about a small backyard canal. This is a mega project in the heart of one of Asia's most sensitive river systems. Even if the politics calm down, the canal still has to survive reality. And reality is messy. There's the engineering challenge: floodplains, soft ground, bank stability, sedimentation, ongoing dredging, and the cost of keeping a major canal navigable year after year. There's the social challenge: land acquisition, compensation, consultation, relocation, who benefits first, and who pays first. There's the environmental challenge: altered water flows, habitat disruption, water quality, and the unknowns that only show up after a system is operational. And there's one more risk that often gets buried beneath the geopolitics. Will the canal carry enough traffic to justify its cost? That may be the most important question of all, because infrastructure projects can be strategically useful and still disappoint financially. They can be politically popular and still underperform. They can solve one bottleneck while creating another. The canal does not automatically turn inland Cambodia into a frictionless export machine. Cargo still has to be loaded, scheduled, transferred, and connected to larger maritime routes. So this is not a magic trench. It is a very expensive bet. Step back, and the canal becomes about more than boats. For Cambodia, it's about autonomy, the ability to say, our factories, our waterway, our route to the sea. For Vietnam, it's about vulnerability. A downstream country watching another state alter part of a river system that helps feed its people. For China, it's about influence, not necessarily through headlines or military drama, but through something quieter and often more durable: infrastructure, finance, construction contracts, long-term presence. The Funan-Techo Canal will not decide the future of Southeast Asia by itself, but it does reveal something important about the region. In the 21st century, power is not only about borders. It's about roads, ports, railways, dams, and increasingly, who controls the route from the factory to the sea. What makes the Funan-Techo Canal so fascinating is that both sides have a point. Cambodia is trying to solve a real geographic and economic problem. Its inland trade has long depended on routes it does not fully control. Vietnam is reacting to a real environmental risk. Its delta is already under pressure, and even small changes in water timing can matter. And China sees what it often sees in moments like this, a chance to turn infrastructure into long-term influence. If the canal works, Cambodia could gain a more direct route to its own coast, lower some trade frictions, and strengthen economic sovereignty. If it fails, or underdelivers, it could leave Cambodia with heavier financial burdens, deeper foreign dependence, and a scar across communities and wetlands that cannot easily be undone. So the real question was never whether Cambodia has access to the sea. It always did. The real question is this: who controls the path from Cambodia's economy to the ocean?